you, and we.
And we've got the panel here.
You let me speak. I want you to know how valuable you are to our family. And we are a family, and we care about each other, and everybody is welcome. And I want you to know that from my heart, from the board's heart, and from the production staff's heart. And that is the truth. So I'd like to introduce you to our Associate Artistic Director, who will introduce the panel, Kathleen Warnoch.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and thank you to our guests tonight who are going to talk a little bit, because along with being wonderful feminists and scholars and writers and editors, they've all hung out with Merril Mushroom. And Merril is on the phone and on speaker, so I'm going to pull the table. We will see if we can hear her. If not, people can repeat stuff or directly ask her questions because she is a national treasure. So I'm going to introduce you to our panel, and if you would please acknowledge, when I read your bio, and we will get ready to go. So first off, we have Rose Norman, who is general editor of the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project, a project to collect memoirs of lesbian feminist activism in southern states during the last 3 decades of the 20th century.
Woo!
And she also says the project is Merril Mushroom's idea and has led to a series of special issues of Sinister Wisdom that Rose and Merril have guest edited along with others from Women's Rights. Writers Conference. They have published 4 special issues of Sinister Wisdom since 2014, and 2 more are in the works. Please go to Sinister Wisdom and subscribe. It's incredibly cheap, and they have really great gifts. And you can just go online. It's literally like $5 an issue. So let's see. And you can get these issues that they edited already from the back issues. So Rose is native Alabama, and co-founded the Women's Studies program at the University of Alabama. Roll Tide in Huntsville. Huntsville's a different team, aren't they? Okay. From which she retired in 2010. She directed the Women's Studies program and chaired the English department. Thank you, Rose Norman. We also have with us Rena Carney. Rena was co-founder of the Pagoda, a lesbian international community and cultural center in St. Augustine, Florida. Wow. That was active from 1977 to about 1999. She wrote, produced, and performed in plays at the 50-seat Pagoda Playhouse from 1977 to 82, and then she moved to Gainesville, Florida, and shifted her energies to mainstream theater, as we call it. I'm sorry, that was the playwright speaking. During the 1980s and 90s, she performed regularly in Florida State Theater at the Hippodrome, and she maintains her AEA membership. You could have come in on your card. And continues to write plays, especially for children with disabilities. So thank you for joining us tonight. And then we have Cassandra Langer. Yes! In fact, she's already a Facebook friend of mine. Who is an art historian, critic, and appraiser. She is the author and editor of several books, including New Feminist Criticisms, Art, Identity, Action. She lives here in New York City. And blogs at CassandraLanger.com. So I'm going to turn it over to the ladies, and we're going to play around with the phone and see if we can get Merril.
Kathleen,
yes?
I'd like to just do a shout out
Yes?
to Michelle Carlsberg
Woo!
for putting this together for our company.
Okay, so take it away, my friend.
No stress, ladies.
Well, let me start because I'm Merril's oldest friend, and we forged IDs together to get into the club, so I guess I might as well kick off with that. This place is so clean, I can't believe it. Comparatively speaking, club was about half the size that she wrote this play about. And it had a terrible carpet on the floor that smelled from mildew, because it was Florida after all, in Miami. And smoke, much more smoke than you guys could ever imagine. And I loved all of the drinking, because people would come in there and share one beer for the whole damn evening because they had no money. And things like that. And essentially, I think that it's really hard to recreate the environment, because I don't think many of you, although I do see a few gray hairs here, understood what it was like in Miami, and on the beach particularly. There were 3 or 4 big bars on the beach. They had drag shows, and they were really good female impersonators. I knew many of them. And they didn't have the sort of political correctness we're talking about now, because it just wasn't possible. The community was very small.
Mal said something.
She's right in front of you, Cassandra, in the phone.
She said it was very small.
I can't.
Is it on the speaker?
Yes, they were small, weren't they, honey? Except for Billy Lee's, of course. Which, right, which had a huge dance floor and a mixed company, because every time there was a raid, there'd be a little red thing that'd go on, and we'd switch partners. I'm serious, no, really, because the cops would come in, like what Merril showed, and it was worse if you were underage, because then you were really up against it, and they weren't nice at all. And sometimes they would take you off in a car. We had one friend, and you had to go down on them to get out of them reporting you or taking you to your mother. I mean, it wasn't pretty. You know, the mafia sort of controlled things, but even so, there was a lot of ugly stuff that happened in those days. You're really lucky. You don't have to go through it at all.
We were against the law. We were criminals. We were perverts. We were guilty of crimes against nature, and we could be put in jail and sent to the mental hospital, but anybody didn't know what doing it.
Exactly. And then there was the losing your career. If you got caught, they published your name in the paper, and if you had a job at a university or something, it was gone, all over.
Look at the Charlie Johns investigations in Florida. They went on for 10 years, and they were McCarthy-esque, and they were horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. People committed suicide, people left town. It was just awful. And it had nothing to do with who you were as a person. You were just a pervert. So welcome to perversion here. Yeah, it is much better. I think the South, for many of you who are in northern states or anything, you probably don't know much about it except what you hear about the racism. Another thing about the mixed crowd was that would have been impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely, and it was scary too, because occasionally we would go over to Overtown, which was down by the Jacksonville Hospital, and, you know, people would come in, and I didn't think anything of it, and neither did you, Merril, at the time, and, you know, somebody would say to you, child, you don't belong here. You best get out, because it's gonna be trouble. And, you know, we... Yeah, house parties generally is where we mixed more than anything, and you would go to somebody's house and mix, and nobody thought anything of it. But at that time, the segregation was terrible. Yeah. Yeah, lots of that too, and then of course, besides the Johns Committee, we had Anita Bryant.
Sunshine Street.
sunshine tureen, fresh frozen orange juice, naturally. Yeah, I impersonated Anita Bryant.
And people thought it was actually
They
Anita
did.
Bryant.
Pummeled with oranges. I didn't experience the 50s, but I experienced the 60s, and I liked how you called it the exuberant 60s. And it's just a stupid 19-year-old that thought Anita Bryant was hilarious. And when we opened the pagoda, Anita Bryant appeared, and I performed around the state some, and was almost killed one time. Some guys really literally saved me. People thought I was Anita Bryant and lobbed a million oranges at me. Well, I was throwing them out of my. Yeah.
But she would.
Yeah.
The script they put together entirely from news clippings.
Yeah.
I think she actually said about the gays and so on.
Well, I mean, the woman had a 6th grade education, as you recall. It's serious. And her husband used to be at Billy Lee's all the time. Remember, Merril? That was the big joke.
Yes.
They did.
But it did have the unintentional effect of organizing gay activism in response to her crusade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We were 10 years after Charlie Johns.
Right, exactly.
And on, he put out this purple pamphlet. Sandy, remember the purple pamphlet?
Oh, I do.
Oh my God, it was like rules for dealing with homosexuals in the state of Florida, and it was full of like these lewd pictures. It was a really good little porn book with
That was the good part of it, Merril. You remember during Anita Bryant, I mean, it was really quite terrible. These guys would come by and shoot you with buckshot at the bus stop. A couple of my friends had that happen. Or they'd wait outside by the bars because she riled people up so and beat up the fayest looking guy they could find.
And if you were a bunch walking down the street, one of these redneck dudes would likely say, "Oh, you want to be a man? Let's see if you can fight like a man."
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, it was awful. I got stoned one beach day. We used to go to this gay beach and so on. There were these guys hanging out, and I was seeing this mistress, actually, of George Rath's, who was in the Barry Ashton Review. They used to come into the bar at Billy Lee's. Martha Ray used to come in too. I gave her a rose once. She was very sweet about it. I was very young and, impressed with her. So we're walking down the beach after, we go in, and these guys followed us, and they started throwing stones at us on the street in Coconut Grove with, "Oh, you dykes, you want to really see how it is," and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it was a very different kind of a scene. You had no gay centers. The bars were the only places you could go. They had barbecues for us on the Sundays because there was no community, essentially, and they took care of us.
Yeah, and we had to be careful, and we were underage, so we were even more of a danger, because if any of the adults got caught in any kind of proximity to kids that were underage and we were all gay, then they'd be cited for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, as well as crimes against nature and really being hot-watered.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think in the 60s it got a little better. Merril, you were probably gone by then. I think you probably were in New York with the people who founded the lesbian herstory and some of those people.
Yeah, 62, 63, I went to New York in 63, I lived in Alabama in 62, the desert state. I came to New York and I hung out at the Sea Colony and the Washington Square, and sometimes we'd go uptown to Cookies. I don't know if anybody there remembers any of those bars, but they were
Oh, yeah, Cookie was I was new in town, and I sat down at the bar, and she sidled up to me and, you know, said, "Oh, you're new in town." Oh, and I was like, "What?" She was like this, out of a movie, I think is the best way, and you would know. That.
We're here, Merril.
We're here.
I can't hear anything except click, click.
Hi, Merril.
Are you still there?
I'm here, are you there?
Yeah,
We're
we're here, but is your speaker on?
So what? I'm not scared.
Yeah, my speaker, well, kind of, yeah, I've got a house phone, just a regular phone that hangs up and you doesn't pick it up again.
Oh, well.
Speakerphone.
No, this is great.
So-
People,
We can hear
So do we
you.
have questions for Merril? Like maybe we can.
Yeah, are there any questions?
Hi, Merril. Because the play was first premiered in Los Angeles or California in the 80s. Merril. Hi, Merril. My name is Wadey. You can't see me, but hi. So you premiered the play in California during the 80s. Can you talk about the reception from the audiences who viewed it then, and why, and, you know, and talk about sharing it with us now 30 years later?
I didn't get the question, all I heard was California in the 80s and...
did you see it there, and what did you like about it? Did you see the show in California in the 80s, and what kind of reaction did it get?
No, I did not see it, but Bob Patrick sent me a copy of a review that it got, and it was a good review. And I hope that people enjoyed it and had a good time, but I did not see it in California.
Did she see it in New York?
She didn't. No, it wasn't Lamar. It was in Florida next, and she didn't see it there.
Really more to the
Where did you get to see it?
Right. Like more to the point, like, is there a difference in how audiences react to Bar Dykes now as opposed to then? Like how has that evolution happened over the years?
Have you been able to what kind of differences have you seen in the changes of people who've seen the show over the years? This is only the third production, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, this is a good production. Yeah, thanks for repeating, because everybody's far away from the phone is breaking up, and all I hear are pieces of their voice.
Oh, she's.
So have you ever actually seen a production of this?
Actually, I have never seen the production.
Let's fly her here.
Yeah.
She won't come.
We tried. Yeah, we did make it up.
That is the art book of Bar Dykes, which is on sale in the lobby.
$6.
A bargain.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have comments like
Does anyone else, like, they're gonna ask you if they want to
like,
ask
how
a
do you
question
think,
or
like,
something, and I'll repeat it.
a play like this has been received differently through the years?
Oh,
Like,
God, yes. I mean, I can imagine it would be difficult for any of you under 50 at least to be able to even imagine what it was like to try and form a community in that kind of a hateful environment. In my case, when I came out, I mean, the community that I had was mainly very maternal gay men, essentially, who created a very nice atmosphere, including what I call my surrogate mothers, Jackie Jackson, formerly of the Jewel Box Review, who was retired and, you know, kind of down there, and Charlie Pierce, who was a female impersonator, quite well known, who was another surrogate mother with a tongue like a viper. But nonetheless, it was a great fun to watch him perform, and Dale Carter, who used to do Ima Sumac like nobody I ever saw. And things like that. And they would invite you, right, Merril, to their homes, and you'd have Sunday barbecues, and all of the underage kids, because they couldn't get into the bar, and unlike us, they didn't forge the ID quite as quickly.
There was a place in Miami, an apartment complex that was called the Manor Apartment.
Right.
And there were several gay guys that lived in that apartments there, and they would let us high school kids tryst in their apartments.
That's right.
Somewhere else that we could go. And they were really taking a big risk by doing that. I hadn't thought about that until I got older and saw the danger that they could have been in. But that was when I was in high school, kind of where we went, was to the Manor to meet whoever we were going to do it for the evening. And then we went to the beach. The beach was glorious, except every now and again the police would come and take everybody off the beach and run everybody into paddy wagons and take us down and book people for vagrancy, which they had 23 different counts of vagrancy that they could charge a person with. They could put them in jail, hold them overnight 24 hours on suspicion before they let them go. Let's go. But the beach was wonderful anyway, and we all took the risk of that. Otherwise, we hung out at the bars. That was about what it was, and occasionally in people's private homes for private parties.
Rose?
It was kind of a sense of community, actually, because we were an oppressed minority, and such as it was, and we all thought that we were much more creative and better dressed than a lot of the straight people around where we lived. But we always had to be careful because there was always the danger of the police coming and busting us and sending us off God knows where. We lose our job and we lose our family and get kicked out of school, and our parents might find out, which was always a harder trip for us younger kids. And there were people that lived there that had been thrown out of their families. Their families wanted nothing more to do with them. So we had people like Sandy's mothers who would rally around and help support people and help them get maybe little jobs cleaning or driving a tram, give them a place to sleep, maybe in the living room. Yeah, it was really rough and it was really wonderful all at the same time. It was just an interesting juxtaposition of emotions and lifestyles and yeah.
I'd like to ask the ladies a question here.
Yes,
We-
Michael
we-
Zegarski, the panel.
A question, you know. As I mentioned to you when we met in the lobby and shared our many emails, but, you know, TOSOS is committed to representing all people in our community. And this year, we felt it was very important to represent what I feel, what we feel is a marginalized community, which is women, lesbian women. So our gift was to do this show, to give a voice and to have a lens into the history. One of the things we struggled with, and I'd love you to comment on, and I'd love to also hear Merril's response, was we had a lot of pushback about using the word bar dyke. And I'd love you to comment. Sorry?
It's a great word.
No. No, but it's very interesting because we had, I would love to have, because it was a, you know, here I am, a white gay man. We're producing a show about lesbians in the late 50s. It's called Bar Dykes. And I just would love you to comment on that and, you know, because, just to comment on it, because it's been an issue for us as we forge forward in producing this.
To back Michael up, we spent an entire board meeting freaking out about terminology.
I missed that
I mean,
one,
like
didn't I?
literally, yes, you did.
Yeah,
Like
you were
literally,
sick.
like it
No,
was
you
a
were in
bunch-
surgery.
It was a bunch of gay men sitting around going, "Can we say that?"
If only you'd asked women before that meeting.
Well, that would have been nice.
I don't have your number, Ann.
And it was great to see them sweat.
response.
And whoever's gonna talk first,
Rose.
whoever's gonna talk first,
Rose.
Merrill can hear it if you hold the phone.
Okay. Just hold the phone.
You can share it everywhere, you have to look at me, it's okay.
This is Rose talking, and this brings up something I've been wanting to bring up all along here, is that this is sort of in the context of another project that's going on, a Herstory project. It's called the Last Call NOLA Dyke Bars. New Orleans used to have 10 lesbian bars. Today it has 0. Right? And there's a group in New Orleans now who are interviewing those bar dykes that used to go to those New Orleans dyke bars and making theater out of it. So if you Google Last Call NOLA, you'll get to see one of them that they put online. So it's definitely historically correct and not a slur.
Yeah, well, I'll talk story. So for me, when we started the Pagoda, I just knew I was going to start a theater. And my friends started the State Theater in Florida, the Hippodrome, moved to the beach with my girlfriend, and we found this old house, and there were 12 cottages and theater downstairs. We did some great stuff. But on the second floor is where we'd have our meetings. And I remember one day, and this is in the early 70s, and you're talking about the oppression and the things that happened and the violence. We're in there meeting, and they're just banging on the door, and these guys are out there, and they've come in and they're shouting, "Muscle cunts! Muscle cunts!"
Oh, damn.
And so back to language, you know, I actually kind of like that.
TOSOS, muscle cuts.
In my other life, I'm a speech pathologist, and I work with people that can't speak. And words are so important in the language of our history and our culture. And we didn't have words. I'm a dyke, I'm a butch, I'm a femme, I'm a bulldagger, I'm a muscle cunt. Give me the words and let me have them, and don't take them away.
Right.
Yeah, okay? Okay.
But I think it's sort of like the rehabilitation of queer, and you have to go into the whole idea of class.
Yes.
All right? Class is a big issue, and it was a big issue back then.
Yeah.
If Merrill, there was a bar, you remember it, Merrill, called Googies? Had sawdust on the floor, and it was the diaper, what were they called? Diaper dykes. The diaper truck drivers, because you couldn't get jobs. Okay, all they could do was either be like early UPS sort of delivery thing and the diaper trucks. And that's how they made the living. The girls who were femmes generally helped support them because they could get the job and pass. So that was part of it. But we would go occasionally, those of us who were in college and sort of upper class as compared to, and we didn't do a lot of fraternizing, if you recall, because they were just too rough.
We have a question here.
Merrill, my name is Donna Bungo, and I'm a member of the Sirens. I don't know if there's any other Sirens members here, but we lead the Pride March every year, and
Okay, well, Donna's asking you a question because she is in the Sirens, which is the motorcycle club that leads the Heritage.
Yeah, like Cheryl Stewart is still there, and Jerry and Gigi. But the interesting thing was that we took a trip over to the Herstory building in Brooklyn. And after you've seen this play, I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested in the history of the lesbian gay movement, not only in New York City, but in the United States. Everything there is archived. And I remember Merril's name now being mentioned when we were out there. And the Sirens have a lot of respect for this, for the people who put it together. But I'm just putting that out that if you have a chance, it's over in Brooklyn, and you can Google it. You could easily spend a couple days going through stuff like old papers and
What's it called?
The lesbian Herstory Archives. Yeah, the Herstory Archives. It's in Brooklyn. I don't remember the street in town, but it's very interesting, and it really paints a picture of the struggles that went on early on and have continued. And you're probably pretty up on it.
Yes, we'll go into that next.
Would you ladies comment on this play and the relevance of this play today in 2019? What the perspective is of that from your point of view after seeing it?
Who wants to go? I think it's important. I think filling in gaps in the history that we have, essentially, for particularly a younger generation. I mean, I'm not going to be here. I think Anne will probably be gone. Most of us old
6 months.
people. Yeah. So somebody's got to carry on, and with the Orange Plague in the White House, I mean, who knows how long our rights are going to remain, all of the ones we fought for and we worked so hard for. So somebody's got to carry the torch. You guys are it.
I have actually.
Merril, could you hear that?
Rose and Rena, do you have a comment on that as well?
I do. I'm thinking about the production, and I love the period and the costumes and everything that
Bravo
you
to
did.
the costumes.
But really, all that disappeared, and it was women together and the same stories today. You know, us remembering my mother. Yeah. I mean, I cried when you just did it so well. And so for me, it's relevant as a meta kind of the world of women. And it's hard to find the words, but it all exists today. Yeah.
Well, I think parents are much more accepting because of the progress, which is a big help. Absolutely. Although in the South, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Rena, you take it. You're in Alabama. Rose, sorry.
Oh,
And Merril also wanted someone to talk about the Duke archives.
right. We have collected over 100, well, it's over 150 now, interviews, mostly recorded with lesbian feminist activists in the South from the 68 till about 1999, and they are all being archived at the Sally Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture at Duke University. And they'll soon be actually, they're inventorying it now. We're still collecting these interviews. The books that we're publishing with Sinister Wisdom, these are special issues of the Quarterly Journal, are consist of stories that we have carved out of these interviews, organized thematically. There is one on the NOLA, The Last Call, our project. I should show you the photograph of them sitting at a pool table, the 6 or 7 of them. It's a great picture. Let's see, is there anything more that we should say about it, about the project? No?
Just letting people know that archives are there and available for anybody that's interested in learning about the South, not as being a primitive scholar or arid depressive, place where there was some really strong lesbian feminist activism, women working really, really well in all areas regarding civil rights. We had women's clinics, we had battered women's shelters, we worked with straight feminists, we worked with some men. There was a lot going on in the South at the time as far as civil rights and liberties that people don't know about. It didn't all happen in New York and California the way a lot of people seem to think.
I'd like to talk about that for a minute. When I met Rose, she's going to write a book about the pagoda. Now I'm going to give her my papers. I wanted to find out why she wanted to write a book about pagoda. And tell me if this is right or not. When I started understanding what's happening with these lesbian herstory archives, they were collecting stories of women all around the United States, but there was not many from the South. I'm like, why was that? Yeah, the South, so oppressed. Is this correct? And you decided to gather the women's stories from the South because we passed. We survived. I grew up in rural North Florida, Catholic. I can pass. And in that, in finding the stories, I'm fascinating. I gave her my papers and I gave her my heart.
Yeah.
So
We have a question here.
we have a question. It's a little bit unique because it's over text. And it's
Wait,
from
is it
someone
for
who's...
me?
Yes.
I was gonna say it was from someone who saw the show yesterday and had a question. But since he's here, ask your question, Chris.
Marvin just wrapped the phone, Chris.
No, I was going to say it as a cisgender gay male watching the play, while the specific courtship rituals were very unique and something that I was unfamiliar with, the behaviors, the relationships particularly, and the circumstances were very familiar. Were very something I could completely relate to. And I wonder if you could speak to Merril wrote this in the 80s about the 50s. Clearly, something resonated with her about the behaviors and about that. And I just wondered, as an outsider, is this how it's continuing? Is this behavior? No. So that's A. And B, where do we see the future as somebody who's completely, as you know, I watch this play and I relate to it hugely. And where do we see the future of activism in that lens, through that lens, that we are all in this together? So I guess that's a two-part question.
Did you get that, Merril?
She said the panel should answer.
He said the panel should answer it. So.
Yeah. Y'all do.
Take it away.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is something Merril said when I interviewed her the other day, was that many of those behaviors were based on, or were modeled on men, the way men behave, and also on heterosexual couples.
Right.
That is, that's the model you have. You want to say something more about that? No.
Well, that was kind of the butch theater that there was. There was a lot of theater in being butch and being femme, as well as a lot of reality. But the behaviors in play were kind of exaggerated. But nevertheless, they all took place. And I remember practicing with my friend Sue, who had to go out of our pocket and sticking those cigarettes out of the pack and have a whole against
Merril, about Kai Kai. It was, you know, I always remember feeling so weird because I would come into the bar, you remember? I used to get teased about it all the time because I said I wanted to be all the women and all the men I am. So why do I have to be one thing or the other? But it was very de rigueur at that time in order to have a girlfriend.
We have a question over here.
Well, and dancing was difficult. I always had a difficult time because I never was a very good lead. If you recall. Does anybody have a question?
Okay, so I know we like kind of touched around like different periods. So first of all, I loved it as, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is to Merril and the panel. And so first when I saw a dress rehearsal, so it just brought so much nostalgia to me. And I came up in the gay scene in the early 90s. So, or in the gay bars in the early 90s. So, you know, it was just the whole, how we communicate with one another, slow dancing. I haven't seen slow dancing in like 20 years in the gay bars. But so my question to all of you, especially you, Merril, because you wrote this play, this was set before Stonewall. And we're celebrating 50 years of Stonewall. And with your experiences and panel's experiences, if you were to, let's say, write the story a few years after Stonewall, what would be the difference you would think as far as Bar Dykes as it is compared to Stonewall from a lesbian's point of view or lesbian queer woman's point of view?
Well, it's easy for me to answer that because I haven't been to the gay bars since Stonewall, so I don't know.
Ah, very insightful.
Anybody want to grab
Merril, we're gonna pause for 1 second. I need the cast of Bar Dykes with the directors to go downstairs for notes, unfortunately. It's our second and last preview. Merril, it's our last preview, so the cast needs notes. So we're letting the cast go downstairs. We're pausing here. I think we're gonna continue to chat. No one's required to stay, but I feel like it's fun chatting.
And you can also go to the bar at any